I have Krystii Melaine on, and she is coming to us from Washington. Is that where you are?
Yes,
Yeah,
Spokane, Washington.
but that's not going to be your home for a whole lot longer, is it?
Oh, you've heard already.
You know where
News
I heard
travels
it
fast.
from? I heard it from you.
Oh, did you? Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, when I saw you at the Briscoe.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that is can we talk about that, or should we edit all this out?
No, we can talk about it. Yeah, I
Right.
guess enough people know now that it's happening, so there's no
Yeah.
point in hiding it.
Yeah. You're going to be going to Wyoming, is that correct?
Yeah, Cody, Wyoming, of
Yeah.
all places. I mean, I don't know. We're up for a new adventure, and this will be my first custom built studio. I've always had studios in old garages, and currently I'm in a basement, and it's a very nice walkout basement with great views of the river, but it's got low ceilings and it's a whole lot of small rooms. So I'm forever going from one end to the other, trying to get tools and build boxes in funny corners. And it's just, I'm painting bigger, as you can see behind me. So
Yes.
it's just become too awkward in this space. And there's a curving staircase to get up to the main floor to get the boxes out of here. And so my husband started dangling Dream Studio in front of me, and I resisted for a year and said, no, I love it here. I don't want to leave the river and the trees and my yard and everything. But he finally convinced me. And so we're doing it. We're new stage of life.
And so why Cody though? I mean, there's studios everywhere, right? Even in your town, there's probably some really amazing
Yeah,
places outside that would have.
I guess so. We just want something different. And, we live in a river valley here, which is wonderful because the river is right in the backyard, but the trees are growing taller every year. And we're just starting to feel a bit closed in. We can't see the sky. I haven't seen a sunrise or a sunset for 12 years here. So,
Oh yeah, that's hard.
uh, and we came from a hilltop where we could see all the way around. So just the idea of having space again and seeing the horizon and seeing the mountains and just a different place. We like adventure.
I was going to say you clearly like change, right? I mean,
Yes.
you're a person
Yeah.
that not only you, I'm sure your husband as well. You clearly embrace change because
Mhm.
if people haven't noticed who are listening on this video and audio, is that that's not an American accent. It's
No,
an,
it's not.
it's an Australian accent.
Yep.
So since we're talking about change, let's just zip right to Australia. Let's go
Mhm.
to down under, which
Yep.
I find to be one of the most interesting things about you is that you made this leap from, one continent to the other. But
Yeah.
tell me, where did you grow up in Australia?
I grew up in a very small town in Victoria. It's the southeast corner of Australia. And we always lived on the edge of town. So I was just a small town girl with small town parents. And I guess I wanted to get out of there. And it was great. I liked living there. I lived there till I was 10. And I drew and painted. I looked at horses that were all around us. I was a bird watcher. So that was my whole life. I knew by the time I was 4 years old, I knew I was going to be an artist. My parents
Or
said I made a grand announcement. I'm going to be an artist. And they went, well, I guess she's pretty determined then.
that was at 4?
At 4,
That's
yeah.
what they said. And why
Yeah.
do you think that you knew you were going to be an artist at such a young age?
I don't know. I was born to be an artist. I
Yeah.
mean, you
I
don't
mean,
question these things. It's just been there. That's my passion. That's the thing I love to do. And my brain is full of images that I take from the world around me, and they get filtered into paintings, and I just have to get them out.
mm.
So I don't know. That's my life. That's my passion.
Were either of your parents or siblings or grandparents, was anybody in the arts when you were growing up?
My father is very artistic. It took me a long time to realize that because he had to be the breadwinner and he had a job as a printer, which was creative in a way, but
Yeah,
he
very
was
much so.
always a frustrated creator. And he was never a painter, but he makes things. And he can make anything you want out of wood, out of metal. He does stained glass. So, very creative person, not a business cell in his body. He's totally right brain, full on artist, very impractical person. But so I got the artistic side from him. But then my mother is a brilliant, or was a brilliant business person. So I got both things. I got business from her and artistic from my father.
And were they promoting you when you were a little kid, saying, yeah, you're really great as an artist, keep doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, they supported me all the way through. Actually, they said when I was a baby, when I first started reaching for things, I would always pick up pens and pencils, and they never took them off me. They would just give me paper to draw on. So they encouraged that right from when I was a baby. And I guess by 4 years old, that was all I knew or something. I don't know. I don't know whether that was environment or whether I was born that way. Who knows how that works?
Well, yeah, I think it's a combination of things,
Hmm.
honestly, is what I'm starting to figure out. I've interviewed enough artists and I'm trying to get to the bottom too. Why do people go into art and why do others don't? Did you
Hmm.
win any contests or things like that, praise in like middle school or junior high or any of that thing?
Yes. In second grade, I won first prize in the school art competition with a lovely painting of a mermaid with little fish and seaweed and everything. I still remember that painting, but that kind of confirmed for me that I was an artist. So then from then on, I was the school artist. In class, I would kind of skimp on the writing and do a lot of illustration in any class project. And the teacher would always hold it up and, look what she's done. And of course, that made me a target for bullying because I was praised so much and the other kids couldn't do what I could do. So it kind of was hard on me in a way, but I was still quietly proud of what I was doing. But
Yeah,
I was shy. I mean, I was painfully, painfully shy.
yeah.
So I didn't speak.
I
I
find
guess
that,
I expressed myself through painting.
yeah, and I have found this over and over that this story that you just told me. Almost
Hmm.
almost every artist I talk to has the same story that they win a
Really.
prize, that they're
Hmm.
yep, that they're singled out as the class artist, and
Hmm.
it ignites them, and they see that as who they are, and then they
Yeah.
put all their energy and effort toward that, which
Hmm.
is what, as I think we both understand, even though I'm not an artist and you are, is that you can have all the skill set you want, but if you don't have the drive, then
Yes.
you can't get to that next level. You really have
Yes.
to want it beyond, beyond anything else, I think. So you
Hmm.
said you were bullied. That's interesting. I've never heard that
Hmm.
because you were very talented in what you could do, and other people in your classes were like, oh, she's the teacher's pet.
I guess so, yeah. And just because I was shy, that, they would stick pins in me to make me make a noise and that sort of thing. It
Oh
was
my
awful.
God. It really is awful.
Yeah. But, I think
But a
all kids,
down under kind of thing.
I guess so. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I dealt with it, it taught
Right.
me a lot of self-resilience and that
Sure.
sort of thing. So
So what was the town's name, that little town in southeastern Australia?
Bairnsdale.
Bairnsdale?
Hmm.
And I bet most people don't leave Bairnsdale, do they? They probably stay
No,
right.
all my family and cousins and everyone are still in Bairnsdale. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Is it a ranching or farming community? What do they do there?
it's kind of a regional hub sort of thing. So I guess there's farming all around it, but the town itself is a town where people do town things, I guess.
Yeah. But it's a
Hmm.
small town, like a very
It's
small,
small. Yeah. Yeah.
less than 10,000 kind of thing.
I guess so. I mean, this is back in the 60s when I was
Yeah.
there. So
Right. It's
it's
changed.
grown a lot since then. I probably wouldn't recognize it if I went back.
And so you left, was it Bairnsdale that you left at 10?
Bairnsdale.
Bairnsdale.
I left there at 10.
And where
Yes.
did you guys move to?
We went to Albury, which is a slightly larger regional town on the border of Victoria and New South Wales. And that was my mother's work that took us there. Otherwise, we would never have got out of Bairnsdale.
What did she do?
She, before I was born, she was a legal secretary and she had ideas of becoming a lawyer. But in those days, you couldn't work and be married. So as soon as she got engaged, she lost her job as a legal secretary and she was a mother and raised me and my brother. But when I was maybe 5 or 6, she started selling Bessemer, which is a party plan homewares thing, kind of like Tupperware. I don't know
Hmm.
whether people know what that is, but she turned out to be a really good salesperson. So she would go and sell this. Women would gather all their friends in their home and she would go and do a demonstration and sell homewares. And that she did so well that she then got a regional distributorship in Albury. So we moved there when I was 10. we were there for maybe a year and a half, and then she got a state distributorship in South Australia, and we moved to Adelaide. And I lived in Adelaide for the next 15 years. So my teenage years and my fashion business were in Adelaide.
Oh yeah, so let's go to there. Let's go to Adelaide. So you graduate from high school in Adelaide?
Yes.
And what did you think you were going to do from that point? What were your interests?
Right up until the second last year of high school, I still thought I was going to be an artist. I had no idea. I didn't know any artists. I didn't know how you be an artist, but I just assumed that when the time came, I could just be one, you know. And in the 11th, year 11, I guess it is, I don't know what the equivalent is here, you do like a vocational meeting with a person that tells you what college courses you should do. And I went to her and said, well, I want to be an artist. And she said, no, you can't be an artist. Art's a hobby. You need a real job. So just dashed my lifetime dream in that moment. But then it got worse, because this is, what are we in, 1979, I guess. And she said, but you're a woman, so really you should just be a secretary until you get married. And then you'll have babies and have a husband to take care of, and you'll just stay at home. So you don't need to worry about a career at all. And that was not my life vision. Like, none of that factored into what I wanted to be. So I was just devastated, but I still had the idea that I need to do something artistic. So I did art in my final year at high school, and I applied for an architecture course, which was a 5-year course, and a graphic design course. But by the end of that final year of high school, I was done with being told what to do. And I realized that I'm kind of headstrong, and I don't like to be told what to do. So the idea of another 5 years of college was just, I couldn't face that. So I thought, well, I'll do this 2-year graphic design course and be a graphic designer, whatever that is. And I did the first year of that, and I was top of the class, and I did really well. And it also included photography and life drawing. So I got a little bit of art. And at that same art school, there was a painting class, a painting course, and they were doing ugly abstract work. So I knew, if that's being an artist, that's not me. I don't want to do that sort of thing, because I'd always drawn birds and horses and animals and people and realism.
Right.
So, and I know that's the same thing. Most artists in those days, if you went to college, you got taught abstract, and most of us didn't want to learn abstract. So I did the graphic design course, but it became pretty obvious that it was an obsolete course. This is just when computers are coming in, and computerized lettering and things that are antiquated now, but at the time it was the greatest thing, that you didn't have to do hand lettering and hand draw everything. And we were still being taught the old hand drawing methods and not being taught this new computerized system. And then there was also a little bit of sexism, that people from industry would come in and talk to the students, and they were already offering jobs to the boys, and they never offered jobs to the girls. And there was only, I think, 4 girls in this class. And we asked one of them, why don't you talk to us? And he went, well, you're girls, like, you don't need a career. And they said, oh, the best you can hope for is illustrating children's books or something, you know, wave of a hand, like, you don't matter. So I realized this is not my industry. This is not going to work. And I'm 18 at this stage, and I was 18 at the end of that year. And for my 18th birthday, my mother took me shopping to buy a special outfit. We went to a local fashion designer and bought this kind of fancy hand-painted, airy-fairy sort of outfit. And it was really expensive. It was more money than I ever imagined people could spend on clothing, but my mother wanted to treat me. And I could sew, so I could understand what went into it. And I took it home and laid it out on my bed and went, you got to be kidding me. We paid that much money for this. It's like just square pieces of fabric with some paint on it and tied up in the corners. So I went to my mother and I said, I can do this. I want to be a fashion designer. And she went, well, okay then. So, and she was looking for a new career. This is, my parents had been divorced in my final year of high school. So she was sort of looking for something new as well. And our whole life had been turned upside down. So she said, well, let's try dressmaking and see if we can make a go of it. So in the Christmas holidays, also the big summer break in Australia, we put a little ad in the local newspaper for dressmaking services, and we were flooded with people who had all sorts of body shape issues and couldn't buy off the rack and needed custom-made clothing. And I found my passion at that point. So painting was just totally sidelined, and I became a fashion designer. And, you know, at 18, I didn't know that that was supposed to be a difficult thing to do. You know, my life motto is, how hard can it be? You know, it's, if other people can do it, I can learn to do it. So I became a fashion designer in that moment.
And
which
what role did your mom have? What did she do?
Well, we started out both sewing. She could sew. She taught me to sew. So we just started out sewing at home,
Right.
but pretty quickly it grew bigger than that. And we rented a small space sort of upstairs over the post office in the city, and employed a salesperson and another sewer. And it just started growing and growing from there. And I did go back to the graphic design course for a few months that next year. But the whole time I was there, I was thinking about sewing and being a fashion designer, and this whole new world had opened up. So I just dropped out in the end because it was a waste of time.
Right.
And I guess the other thing my mother had taught me was that women could be self-employed. She had been self-employed since I was 5 years old. So it never occurred to me that that wasn't a normal way to live. It was just, this is logical. I'm going to be self-employed. And I know other people look at me and go, you were 18. How could you do that? But it didn't seem odd to me. You know, I just did it. I guess I've always just done it. How hard can it be?
Uh-huh.
So gradually we evolved, and pretty soon, like in a year, we moved to a bigger premises and had a proper showroom and employed staff. And I became the pattern maker and designer, and my mother became the salesperson and working with the staff. But of course, at this point, I didn't know anything about pattern making. And suddenly I've got all these clients and I don't know how to do it. So I found a course locally that was for a year of pattern making, but I didn't have a year. I had like a week. So I went to the first course, got all the course notes, went home and taught myself pattern making in a week. So, you know, when you have to, you have to.
What does that entail? Since I'm not a sewer or a designer.
It's learning to draft the flat pattern that will make the fabric fit the body. So it's going from flat fabric to three-dimensional. I always looked at fashion design like a kind of sculpture form, because you're working with the human body and you're making fabric fit perfectly. And of course, I wanted to do bridal wear and evening wear because that's a lot more fun and it's big and flamboyant. So I had to learn to perfectly fit the top of a dress, but then to create the volume. And this is the 80s. Where
I was about to say, this is the 80s. So you want big shoulders, big hair,
sleeves and frills and bustles and bows and everything. So it was a lot of fun. And I learned to do beading and learned to do all of that stuff. And of course, the first few customers I had no idea that I'd never done this before. I still remember the first wedding. My mother came home and said, I've just sold our first wedding. You've got to do the bride and 6 bridesmaids and 2 mothers of the bride and groom and 4 flower girls. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that, but how hard can it be? I did it. They had no idea that was my first wedding. So
you start charging high prices like the dress that you had bought?
Eventually, yeah. And it just grew. I learned to do it on the job. If I didn't know how to do something, we would employ someone. You know, we got to the point where I was doing 2 collections a year, and my mother would travel Australia and New Zealand and sell them wholesale to other bridal wear stores. So it became a big thing. And in the end, we had 50 staff plus a few seasonal ones. Wow. And we moved from that first little store over the post office to a bigger store. And then we expanded the manufacturing upstairs in that building. And then we moved a few doors down in the same street to a much bigger building, huge building that we had completely renovated inside. And the back half was manufacturing, the front was the store. And then we took a little more space on the other side and put in a fabric shop. And then the manufacturing grew again, and we went upstairs from there again. So it just got bigger and bigger and bigger really, really quickly. And once we were selling these collections, there was a lot of pressure on me because all of the staff, those 50 people, relied on me for their livelihood.
Right.
And if I wasn't producing designs that would sell and wasn't making sure that we had the work for them, I created a monster that I had to feed all the time. So it was constant pressure. But, if we got to the point where we were cutting 50 dresses at a time, so I had to get someone in who knew how to use one of these big, a vertical saw where you would stack up, a foot of fabric and cut that through. So if I didn't know how to do it, I'd employ someone and say, so show me how you do this so I could learn.
Had you lost your shyness at that point?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from that business. I learned how to structure things on people, but I also learned how to deal with emotional brides and jealous girlfriends and bridesmaids. And, a lot of our customers were Greek or Italian. So I learned a little bit of Greek and Italian to deal with them, and some of their customs and things were different. So, and then dealing with the staff as well, it was a really interesting life lesson.
Were you painting or drawing or doing anything at that time, or you were just so busy?
I was
drawing in the sense that you were creating twice a year, you were making these new lines, right?
Oh, yeah. So I was constantly researching fashion trends and sketching. All my spare time was taken up sketching ideas and then creating those. And of course, I had to do pattern making and supervise the manufacturing and deal with custom clients in the shop as well. But I also then had to do the marketing side of it. So I would do photo shoots and direct the photographers and the models. And I had to put together fashion parades. So we would do these huge fashion parades with the lights and the music and, 15 models and all that sort of thing. So
was that in Adelaide, or was
that was in Adelaide? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you start this about 1981-ish or so, somewhere in that time?
Yes. Right? Yeah.
And how long did this business last? And there must be a reason that it stopped, because there's a point where, you're successful. You have 50 employees. You're, you found a niche that you enjoy, you're creating, you're successful, but something changes.
Yes, I had met my future husband in 1984, and he lived in Melbourne, which was an 8-hour drive away. And because I was locked in Adelaide with this business, I couldn't get away, and he had a good job and he didn't want to leave Melbourne. So we commuted for 6 years, sort of living apart.
Wow, that's very hard.
But after 6 years, that was getting harder, and I really wanted to be with him. And the painting bug started coming back, and just in the back of my mind, it was like this pressure, constant pressure of the fashion business got to me, and I just wanted to paint. So I was kind of looking for a way out. And I have this firm belief that what you want will come. And I started talking about ways to get out of the business. And good life lesson, business lesson, we had got caught up in a banking scandal. It turned out to be that a bank manager in our city had been giving out business loans with no security. So unsecured loans, which at the time was like free money, we'll take that. We had no idea. We were quite naive about it. But finally, things started falling apart at the bank, and they called in loans all across the city in the same week, and a whole lot of businesses just went into liquidation all at once. So, and that at the time was really stressful, and we tried to find people to buy us out and ways to save the business, but ultimately we couldn't. And so, it was sad, because I had in my mind that this was my life, that I would go on and build something that was of value, and it just disappeared before my eyes in the space of a week. And
your mom was still involved in it too, as well, right?
Yeah, she was still running.
That's even doubly hard.
Yeah, so we were both suddenly out of work, and we walked away with a small debt that we could pay off over a few years and a whole lot of experience. But I was mostly upset for my staff because, they were like family. And but we did manage to have enough equity in the business that all of them got paid their full severance pay. Nobody lost out. So that was good.
And that was about 1990, was that?
That was 1990, yeah.
Yeah. So you did that business for 9 years.
Yes, yeah.
Almost.
So I was only 26, 27, and suddenly my first career was over. That was pretty young to start again, but yeah, I started all over again.
So at that point, you probably got married relatively quickly.
No, I didn't.
Good. Let's hear this, because you've been going back and forth with your husband for what, like 7 years or something?
Yeah, 6 years we'd been apart. And so I finally called him and said, okay, it's all over. I'm coming over. I'm moving in. And, I guess he kind of sort of liked that semi-bachelor life. He was kind of free, but he got over that. But, I moved in such a hurry that there wasn't time to be planning a wedding. And because I'd been in the wedding business, there was no romance for me about weddings. That wasn't something I wanted to do. So I just moved in with him and life went on, and it didn't occur to us until probably 4 years later. It was 10 years. We got married in 94.
Yeah.
And finally pressure from his family to get married. We finally went, let's just do it. So we had a big party and life went on as before.
Yeah. But you immediately, once that closed, you were with him. And did you move to Melbourne?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And so, yeah, tell me about that, because now that's a big switch. I mean, and part of you probably felt a lot of relief, I would think, that you don't have to deal with payroll and, time.
Oh, absolutely.
And all that. And he has a job that seems to be doing well for him.
Yes. Yeah. He was a geologist. So my mother and I, obviously, we tried to save the business, and then we had the whole process of shutting it down and selling everything off. And I remember the last day we finally locked the door on that business for the last time and sort of stepped back and looked at each other and went, thank God that's over. Now we can get on with the rest of our lives. And it really, at that point, it was like a black hole, which had just consumed us. It had been so busy because I'd been working 6 days and 2 nights a week. And on Sundays I slept because I was exhausted. And I'd done that solidly for 9 years. Wow. And had no time for anything else. I'd had to give up my sport and everything. So what
was your sport?
Pistol shooting.
Okay,
I was a pistol shooter.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, that is very interesting.
I know it's an unusual sport, but to me, it was a mind control thing. Again, a lot of what I've done has been about how my mind works. Being an artist is about how your mind works, which is kind of like a can of worms. But I started pistol shooting when I was about 11. My father was a pistol shooter and a lot of his family. And he took us shooting one day and I loved it and said, can I take this up? And did all the training and became a target shooter. And I got onto the state team first. And then by the end, I was on the national team. And at 16, I had a place on the national team to go to the World Championships. But that was my final year of high school. And then my parents got divorced. And at that point, we moved to one side of the city, and the range that I shot at moved way out to the other side of the city. I had no car. I couldn't get to the training and I had to give it up. But that's one of my lifetime regrets, is not have gone to that World Championships. I think that would have been a fun thing to do.
Yeah. And your counselor was telling you can't be an artist.
Yeah.
At that same time.
So really at 17, I lost a whole lot of dreams and then, had to work to get all those back. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. What is it about pistol shooting that you enjoy? I've shot pistols and I've done all that stuff, but I've never competed in a sport kind of a deal.
It's a very slow thing. So each match would be an hour and a half or 2 hours of very careful shooting at the targets and getting every shot perfectly right. So it's mind-body control and being calm and controlling your breathing and maintaining concentration for that length of time. And to me, it's not an active sport. It was a quiet sport. And I just enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's an introverted sport. I probably love it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because you've got your earmuffs on and your
Yeah.
glasses on and you're just focused on your little thing and not looking at anyone else.
Oh yeah, I can see liking that a lot.
Yeah.
Actually. And
Mhm.
so when you get through your black hole, now you can take your sport back up. And do you take pistol shooting back up at
No,
that time? No.
no, I never took it up. No, we were broken into, our house was broken into and all the pistols were stolen.
Ah,
So suddenly that was gone as well. I didn't have them to pick up again.
have you ever
So,
gone back and shot?
oh yeah, I shoot occasionally because
Yeah.
my husband was a friend of my uncle, and so he was a shooter as well. So
Oh, your
yeah,
husband is?
yeah.
Who is
So we had that
better?
in
I
common.
don't even know. I don't even have to ask who's better because I know it's going to be you, right?
Well, he would say it's me because I've got a box of trophies and he
Yes, you
hasn't.
do. And you're on the national team. I'm sure he,
Yeah,
I'm sure he would say it would be.
he's pretty good,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay. So now what do? You've got an open slate. You're still young. You're 28
Mhm.
basically or so.
27, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, now I go to art. I'm going to do it.
Well, yeah, except that here's my big chance. I can be an artist, except I
Right.
still have no idea what that involves. I don't know
Right.
how to be an artist. I've done no art training. I did life drawing and that was it. So
Right.
I kept sewing. I went back to dressmaking for some of my clients just to keep paying the bills,
Right.
And we converted a little tin shed in the backyard for my studio. And so I was trying to make white wedding gowns and paint with oil paints in the same space. So I learned to be very clean.
Yeah, I bet.
And so I started painting, but I had no idea what I was doing, how to do it, what to do. So I was painting horses and birds, and I did landscapes because that's what people did in Australia. I got into a local gallery, and I mean, those paintings were just horrific now that I look back on them. I hope the people that have them are happy.
Well, they're
But
stuck in Australia. They'll be fine.
yeah,
They won't come to the American market.
no, that's true. So I sort of transitioned over the next 2 years. So by 92, I decided to go full-time painting. And I still had no idea what I was doing, but what I was doing was kind of working and people liked it. I got into local shows. I got into a few local galleries that had exhibition events that I could enter and
Mhm.
was accepted into. And yeah, I became an artist and I was happy. I didn't know what I was doing. I was happy.
At some
Wasn't
point,
earning a living.
you clearly became, you did know what you were doing at some point. And how did you
Yes.
do that? Was it just strictly through perseverance and painting, painting, painting? Because really there's no internet at this point, you know?
No, there was no internet. There was books and things were all you could learn from. Again, it was one of these strange situations where a friend of my husband's came to visit and saw that I was painting, and he went, "Oh, my wife does some painting. You should talk to her." Well, it turns out that his wife that does some painting was actually an art teacher with one of the greatest art teachers in Australia. They had this little art school in the city in Melbourne where we were. And so I met with her and she said, "I'm not going to teach you. You need to be studying with Graham Moore." And at that stage, he was in his 80s. He wasn't taking on new students. But she said, "You need to go and show him your portfolio." I was like, "I don't have a portfolio. I've just got all these really bad paintings." So I put those together, photos in a folder and went to see this great man. It was terrifying. He had this fantastic studio full of these incredible paintings. And he was kind of grim. And I laid out my portfolio and he starts leafing through it and going, "Oh my God. Oh, terrible. Oh, hideous." So, I'm wishing the floor would open up and swallow
My
me. I'm so
God.
embarrassed. And he sort of closed the book and he said to me, "Okay, you better start on Tuesday." And I went, "Wait, what?" So I studied with him for the next, I think, 5 years, twice a week. And he was brutal. And he really tore down everything I thought I knew and built me back up again in traditional tonal realism, starting painting plaster casts in black and white and then copying old masters upside down in black and white. And then eventually I was allowed to use color and then doing still lifes and portraits from life. He was a purist about painting from life. So that was my training that actually taught me how to paint. So
Why do you think he took you on? I mean, he's 80 years old. He's a very well-known artist, right, in Australia?
Yes, yeah. He eventually, like years later, he said to me, I think you could become a significant woman artist. So, it was nice.
Was there
He,
other people that he was mentoring at that time, or was it just you?
yeah, he had other students who'd been with him for years, and some of them were good, some of them not so good. And he would be really tough on me. And, I'd do something and he would just rip it apart and I'd be in tears. And one day I said to the others, why is he so hard on me? And they said, because he can see that you've got potential and he knows we've all reached our potential. There's no point in pushing us any further. So that kind of made me understand what he was about. But yeah, it was tough. But I learned a lot. I learned how to paint. I learned how to paint anything. He taught me how to see. He always said, I'm teaching you how to see and interpret in paint. So it was never a formula. It was a process.
And did you feel like your skill set just increased logarithmically once you started with him?
Absolutely. Yeah. Chalk and cheese. The before and after paintings were so different. It was amazing. Yeah.
And you were still focusing on wildlife at that time primarily?
Well, see, that was the kind of odd thing, because at the same time I found Graham and traditional portraiture and still life, I also discovered the Wildlife Art Society of Australasia. I just happened to drive past it in the city one day and saw this sign out saying Wildlife Art Exhibition. And those three words, oddly enough, had never entered my consciousness going together. The idea that you could paint wildlife just never clicked with me, that was a thing that people did. And because, again, there was no internet, I didn't know that in America this wildlife art thing was a giant phenomenon at that stage. So I went to see the exhibition. I joined the Wildlife Art Society. I think I did two really bad bird paintings, and then the third and fourth ones I entered in the exhibition next year and I won a prize. So the two things took off at the same time. So I'm learning this traditional painting from life from Graham, and at the same time I'm painting birds from photographs on the side and not telling Graham, because that was just not the thing to do. But those two things somehow dwelt in my mind at the same time.
And so at what point did you go, okay, I've had enough mentorship, I don't need it anymore?
Oh, I hadn't finished, but he was in his early 90s, and he slipped on the ice one day in winter and broke his hip and never recovered. He just went downhill at that point and gave up teaching. So
you worked with him for almost 10 years?
Yeah, 5 years, I think.
5 years. So you started working with him when he was 85.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
87 something. So,
and you're making wildlife art, and you're succeeding. You clearly are succeeding because you won some prizes in a national, even an international, I guess, really.
Oh, not international at that stage. No.
National.
Nationally, locally, I guess. And I also started doing commissioned portraits at that point. So by this time, my husband has given up being a geologist and is writing books on military history and getting involved with the military. And from that connection, I started getting official portraits to do military portraits and commissions for the military. So I did a lot of official portraits of men in uniforms with medals and things.
Did you enjoy doing those?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was good at it. So,
because you enjoyed it because it was painting and you got to use your creative side?
It was painting, but it was also going back to understanding people. So most of those I did from life. So the person would come and sit in my studio for 30 hours we'd end up spending together while I'm painting them from life and having conversations with them and learning how to draw out their character and express that in the painting. And to me, that just psychologically was a really fascinating process, that I could recreate a person in a painting in paint and have people look at the painting and relate to it like it was the real person. It's kind of like a magical thing that I could do.
Plus, they are interesting people, probably, that are getting.
Oh, fascinating! Right? Yeah, and a lot of them are. They're still friends.
Yeah, successful individuals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, right now, you're in your kind of mid-30s time frame, more or less.
I guess so. Yeah, I've kind of lost track.
Yeah, I'll keep you on track. And so, what happened next? So you're doing portraits. of generals, military people primarily,
Hmm.
and you're still doing your wildlife. And
Yes.
I assume you must be showing in at least a couple of galleries that are
Yes.
strictly in Australia at this point.
Yes. And I got some solo shows, and, I was winning awards. By this time, I was also the exhibition director of the Wildlife Art Society of
Hmm.
Australasia, which was a big job. I did that for 5 years,
Oh, wow.
coordinating their annual exhibition. So there again, I learned a lot from that about working with other artists and what other artists' points of view were, and working with judges, and doing the marketing and promotion and getting people to come to an art exhibition. So that was kind of the art business side of it. It was good training as well.
Yeah. And I'm sure you saw some of the artists that you saw were just amazing artists. And it was also like,
Oh,
okay,
absolutely.
I still
Yeah.
have a lot of work I have to do to
Yes.
get to
Yeah.
this other level, whatever this is.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really pushed me to be the best I could possibly be. And I was painting mostly birds at this stage, because birds are a big thing in Australia. The birds are fascinating. They're big and colourful and loud. So
Mhm.
they're an obvious subject. And I'd been bird watching since I was a little kid. So for me to be able to paint the things that I loved like that was just, by that time I was living my dream life of being an artist.
Mm.
But I wasn't making a living out of it, because
Yeah.
it's Australia and you
And
just
your
couldn't make a living.
and your husband's now working on books on the military, which is probably equally difficult to try to make a living, I would think.
Yes, it was. And he eventually went back to consulting as a geologist
Yeah.
because he couldn't make a living. I mean,
It's hard. It's hard to be a writer.
authors,
It's hard to be an artist.
authors make so little money. You're writing more interesting books than him.
Yeah, and they don't sell that well either. So
no, he has a very narrow market, so
Yeah.
it paid for itself, but it wasn't a money-making exercise. And he still writes now, and I feel so bad for him for the amount of work he puts in and how little money he makes from it. But that's his passion. So
he loves doing it. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's funny. You can't equate it to money when
No.
you're producing things that, even if it affects just one person really that
Mhm.
gets it, makes a huge difference in their life, then it's everything that you wanted. Plus, if it's for you, I get it. Writing is
Yeah.
a very lonely job, and most
Oh,
people
absolutely.
don't make money. Even the majority of people do not make money in writing.
No.
Even
I keep joking. Has he not got a Harry Potter series in him or something? But no, he
No,
hasn't.
I have a feeling a lot of his energy and effort too also goes to help support his wife and your career.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because every
So I
time
guess
I've ever
you
seen you
get
at
to,
any show, he's right
yes.
by your side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
He's definitely my support system.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
it's
He would
important.
say he drives cars and carries bags, but it's a lot
Yeah.
more than that.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, yeah, so what happened from there till at some point you go, I'm going to make a switch from Australia, and that's another pivotal black hole kind of time
yes.
frame. What
Oh, absolutely.
and when was
So
that? How old were you when you did
I
that?
couldn't tell you how old I was, but in 1997, backing up a little bit, in 1996, I entered a big portrait prize in Australia with a portrait of my father-in-law, Michael's father, and won first prize. So the next year I applied for their travelling scholarship, which required 4 paintings and an explanation of how I would spend the funds if I won this travelling scholarship. And I was going to go to Italy and study traditional painting. And so by this time, my brain has left Australia and I'm traveling the world. And this is going to be me, the great world traveling artist. But I didn't win. So I've now opened up a new horizon, but I've got no way to achieve it because I didn't win the traveling scholarship. And I also didn't speak Italian. So my mother and my husband said, it's not logical for you to go to Italy because you don't know Italian. Why don't we look at America as a possibility? And so in 1998, we came to America for our first trip just to explore and see what we could find. And this is before the internet. So, I've done research by reading Wildlife Art Collector and putting pins in a map of where should we go and what can we see. And oddly enough, at that point, I had one pin in Jackson Hole and I had a whole lot of pins on the east and west coasts. So I thought, one pin, there can't be much there. So I didn't go to Yellowstone, which at that time would have been the ideal place to go, but I didn't know that.
Right.
So, but that trip was really successful. I got into a gallery in New Jersey. I started making contacts. I got into, well, I guess after that, I applied for 3 booth shows, wildlife booth shows, Southeastern Wildlife Expo in Charleston, South Carolina, and Nature Works in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then a show in Florida, which that was their last year. They folded after that. But I got into all 3 shows for 2000, it must be. So this is 98. I came home, I applied for the shows and got into the 2000 shows. In 99, I applied for or entered the Society of Animal Artists exhibition and Birds in Art and got accepted into both of them. So in 99, suddenly I'm exhibiting in America. And it was kind of mind-boggling, this little small town girl has suddenly taken on the world, and it was terrifying, but how hard can it be? So I just did it, These things happen step by step, and you go with them. So we had planned for a trip in February of 2000 to come to America, do these 3 booth shows, and then try and gather some more reference photos so that I could paint American subjects, because I had no reference material for American subjects at that stage. But at the end of 99, suddenly my husband got offered his dream job in Canberra to work at the Australian War Memorial as a military historian. And obviously that was what he'd always wanted to do. So we packed up in the middle of me planning for my first ever exhibition trip to America. We're suddenly packing up and selling and buying a house and moving. And in the end, we moved a week before I had to fly out to the US. Michael couldn't come with me because he's just started a new job. So I got a girlfriend to come with me. And yeah, it was a whirlwind of everything happening at once. And I find myself standing in this booth in South Carolina and trying to sell paintings. And I did. And I sold, my first sale at that show was a bald eagle painting to clients who went on to be my best ever collectors, and they're still friends. So that was lovely. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so you do you do that show and some other shows during that.
Yep. I did 3 shows in the space of a month, and then I went to Yellowstone at that stage and started getting reference photos. And I got photos in Florida and other places where we went. And then went home to a new house, had to turn the garage into a studio, and started painting American subjects for American markets.
Yeah, you had to be really stoked after that trip, I would think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because you've opened up a whole new world. There's a lot more artists, you're new people, new subject matter. You're successful. You're selling paintings.
Yeah.
And at that point, were you like, God, I wish I was living over in America and working?
No. See, that didn't occur to us for a long, long time.
Got it.
I guess these, things happen and you just deal with them the best you can. My husband just started his dream job, so the idea of leaving just wasn't a possibility. So we started at that point what turned out to be 10 years of commuting from Australia to America. So we came over twice a year for a month at a time in February, March to do those shows. And then in September, I would do shows in Jackson Hole and places like that. And it just became this whirlwind again. My life has always been busy, I guess because I seek it out. But yeah, I would just paint like crazy for 5 months, go to America for a month, do the shows, hope I'd sell a bunch of stuff, make connections, see the gallery, see the shows, see the collectors, get new reference material, fly back to Australia, spend the next 5 months painting American subjects while I'm surrounded by kangaroos and kookaburras. And it was kind of this weird disconnect thing that I'm painting something from the other side of the world. But yeah, we did that for the next 10 years. It was crazy.
Did you ever try bringing over Australian subject matters for wildlife, like koala bears?
Yeah. I bought a few, but really people didn't want that. I found out pretty quickly that even in America, wildlife was quite regional, so that you could sell water birds in the East Coast, but you couldn't sell those in Jackson Hole, and you could
Right.
sell moose and buffalo in Jackson Hole, but you couldn't sell those in New Jersey and that sort of thing.
True.
So
Yeah, no, it is very true.
yeah, so I learned the market I was dealing with pretty quickly of what worked and what didn't work. So yeah.
And so how many years did you do that back and forth? 10 years?
10 years, yeah. And in those 10 years, obviously things built up and I got new galleries and I got into some of these big shows. So, you know, I got into the museum shows, started happening pretty quickly. And then year after year, I would get into a new show. And at one stage I was doing, I think, 9 museum shows a year.
Wow.
And possibly 1 or 2 solo shows. So I was really, I didn't sleep. I was just painting all the time, but that's what I'd always wanted to do. So this was my dream.
How did you deal with just getting the material from Australia to America? Because that's a big deal. Did you or did you roll them up and let them put them on the stretcher bars, or how do you do that?
No, because I'm a control freak and I wouldn't let anybody else deal with that.
Yeah.
So no, I'd frame them in Australia and I learned about international shipping. I'd ship with FedEx and make my own crates and do all that international shipping paperwork and stuff, and never had a loss or a damage in 10 years of doing that.
Right. Though it's very expensive to do that.
Oh yeah, it cost a lot. Yeah. And just the traveling was costing a lot. And ultimately that's why we decided to move here, because after 8 years, we had traveled to the East Coast in that 8th year, and it had been a horrendous trip. And it was something like 36 hours that we'd been flying and sitting in airports and everything. And we're totally exhausted. And I said to Michael, you know, this would be easier if we lived here. And he said, but I've got a job and I'm not leaving it. So, but that seed was sown, you know, you sow an idea and it grows.
Right.
So during that trip, we discussed it a little bit about, well, you know, if we lived here, this would be easier and that would be easier. And I could do some of these shows that I was in, but I couldn't attend them because I couldn't come back and forth any more than I already was. So that sort of sowed that seed. And after that trip, we went home and looked up the requirements for a green card. And I discovered that I qualified at the sort of the top level. There's Nobel Prize winners pretty much get a free pass.
Yeah.
But down below them is aliens of extraordinary ability. And I qualified. You had to qualify for, I don't know, 5 out of 10 criteria, and I qualified for 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah. Well, you'd won all these national awards. You're in national museum shows.
I'd been in peer-reviewed magazines and had lots of articles written about me. I'd won awards and I was in museum shows, so I could get museum directors to support my application. So we set about putting together that application, kind of not thinking it would happen, but we did it anyway. You know, it's like we hadn't committed to it, but we did it. And my husband was still happily working, and I'm still doing the shows and got my busy schedule, but we worked on getting this application together, and it was a complicated process, and, you know, ended up with like 2 inches of paperwork that we had to put together, sent it in, and then kind of thought nothing of it. They said it can take years, so, you know, just check back occasionally and see how you're going. And we checked back and we were still on the bottom of somebody's in tray somewhere. And so we kind of just forgot about it and went on with life for another 2 years. And by that time, Michael has risen up in his job and is pretty high up in the War Memorial and has achieved a lot of the things he wanted to do, but he really wanted to get back to writing. And so there was kind of starting to be that incentive for him to retire and become a writer again. And at the end of 99, it must have been, I think. No, 2000. When did we move here? I've forgotten. 2010. Yeah, so this must be 2009. The paperwork finally came through, and I had 6 months of arguing with the immigration people about a tiny glitch in the paperwork that we had to sort out. That took a long time, a lot of work to get through that position. But then finally we got a call one day saying, you've been approved and you've got 3 months to take up your green card or lose the opportunity forever.
Wow.
So suddenly, okay, I guess we're moving to America. And we had to scramble, put the house on the market and work out what we were going to do. And it was, again, this happened right before Christmas, which in Australia, the whole country shuts down for Christmas and the summer break. So nobody is buying houses or doing any of that stuff. And the house is not selling and not selling. And we're getting closer to our deadline, which happened to be in February, when we would normally have been coming over to do shows anyway. At that stage, I was in Masters of the American West at the Autry, and that was in early February. So we already had that trip booked. So we knew we had a deadline. This is the day we're leaving Australia. And that was on a Wednesday. The previous week, we finally dropped the price of our house to get it sold, rushed through the paperwork, had all the paperwork signed on the Friday. On the Saturday, we laid out all of our belongings in the yard and had a huge clearing sale where, 2,000 people came to our clearing sale and bought everything we owned. So in the space of a day, we went from, a fully furnished house and all that stuff to nothing. And we'd already shipped a shipping container to America of our books and my art materials and our paintings. And that filled the container. There was no room for furniture. So we sold everything else on the Saturday. On the Sunday, we cleaned the house. On the Monday, we drove to Sydney. And on the Wednesday, we flew to America. That was it. It was just so fast.
What did that feel like, to sell all your belongings, to see it all go, and including your country, right? You're leaving your country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we really
some real
left
mixed
everything.
Feelings there, I would think.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I cried when we left,
Right.
Cried when I left the house because I had built a lovely garden, landscaping all around the house and everything. And we'd put a lot of work into that house and we loved it. So to be leaving that and leaving our friends and family, that was hard. And, but it just happened in such a whirlwind that we just had to do it. It's got to be done. We're doing it. We got on a plane with 2 suitcases each because we'd sort of brought as much as we could with us, and got off at the other end in LA. And had to sit and wait for the immigration process, and they processed our paperwork. And we'd been told we were supposed to get a welcome speech when we got to America. So we're waiting for this grand speech, and the guy, stamp on that paperwork and hands it back to us and walks away. And we just stood there like, what happened to our speech? This is a big thing. We've come to America. Right. And he sort of turned around and went, oh yeah, the speech. Have a good one. And walked away, and we went to each other, okay, welcome to America. So here we are. We've got nothing. We own no possessions. We've got 2 suitcases each. We've got a container full of books and paintings on the ocean somewhere that we didn't see for 3 months. And it was freeing, it was terrifying, but it was really freeing to be completely free of anything. We didn't own anything. We didn't own a car. We didn't own a house. We had money in the bank, obviously, because we'd sold all our belongings, but we had to start completely afresh. And that first year was so difficult because even though we'd been traveling back and forth to America for 10 years, we thought we understood the country, but you don't understand a country until you have to live in it and work out day-to-day stuff of how do you set up a house and how do you get your trash picked up and how do you get the phone connected. And we had this language barrier because we still had very Australian accents and a lot of Australian words that people didn't understand. So we get that blank look of, we don't know what you're talking about, lady. So for that first year, just about every day we faced some new thing that we go, who knew that you could do it that way? It was just so foreign.
So where did you decide to live? I mean, you got a blank slate of the United States. You can pick any city you want, any part of the country. I mean,
we chose Spokane, Washington, oddly enough. And even people in Spokane go, why Spokane? But we love it here. It's a really beautiful place. We did a study from Australia of America and started eliminating places we didn't want to live, basically. We would have liked Jackson, Wyoming, but couldn't afford it, obviously. Right. And so it had to be somewhere affordable. It had to be somewhere with trees and water because we'd come out of 7 years of drought in Australia. So we were not going anywhere near deserts or anything dry. We didn't like hurricanes, tornadoes. We didn't like the humidity of the East Coast. We didn't like the raininess of the West Coast. We liked the mountains, but we had no idea about snow. So we didn't want to go somewhere too snowy. And someone said to us, oh, it hardly ever snows in Spokane. Well, they lied, because it does snow in Spokane. But we learned to love snow. But yeah, after eliminating all of those things, we kept coming back to the Pacific Northwest, and the only city here is Spokane. So we went, let's go and look at Spokane and see what it's like. And we had decided this before we got the green card, because we were at least that much prepared.
Right.
And it turned out that we knew an artist who lives in Spokane, and her husband was a builder. She used to be a realtor. So they were able to show us around and help us get settled. So, but yeah, we arrived in Spokane, lived in a hotel for 2 or 3 months. We bought a car, was the first thing we bought, so that we could travel around and look at houses. And we spent 2 months looking at nearly every house that was for sale in Spokane, and couldn't find what we wanted, because I needed a big studio.
Right.
Michael needed an office that was separate from the studio, because I like noise and he needs silence. And we couldn't find anything. And then finally, this house that we live in had been on my list since we were in Australia. I'd started a list of possible places, but it was too expensive. It was too big. And there were no photos of the house itself, but there was a photo of the river. And I loved the idea of that river. So finally, when we'd run out of houses to look at, and by this time we're exhausted, I'm trying to paint in the hotel room. So for those 2 months, I still had deadlines. So I'm painting in a hotel room with all the furniture pushed to the walls, and not letting the maid in every day. She'd open the door and hand me some towels. And I say, don't clean, you can't get in here. And Michael couldn't stay in the room with me because there was no room. So he would go and sit in a coffee shop all day or something. And we finally came and looked at this house, and it was a wreck. So it's a huge house, really good bones, but it had been let go. It was bank owned. Well, see, that was the other thing that happened between applying in 1998 and moving in, 2008, moving in 2010.
Right.
The crash happened. So I'd done a whole budget of how this was all going to work. Well, that went out the window because the crash happened and art wasn't selling, but also houses were now bank owned. And
Right.
so we picked up this huge house for probably less than half of what it was really worth. We had to do a lot of work to it because it was really run down, but we had time to do that over the
Right.
years. So, it turned out to be just a gorgeous house right on the river, wildlife in the backyard. And it's beautiful. We love it here.
And so you've been there 12 years.
12 years. And that's the longest I've lived in any house anywhere in my life.
Yeah. And during that 12 years, you have gotten different galleries. And you've still continued to do the museum shows.
Yes.
And tell our audience what kind of art that you're doing today. I know you're doing wildlife, but you do other things too, right?
Yeah, I do. I've always done all sorts of things because I trained on portraiture. I always loved horses, always loved painting birds and animals. Yeah. I came to America as a wildlife artist because that's what the big boom thing was in those days. But of course, I came in at the end of that wildlife art boom, and it kind of dwindled away, and some of those shows changed and some of them stopped and the galleries closed and that sort of thing. And I sort of morphed into Western art at that point. When I was still in Australia, our first trip to Wyoming, we're driving towards Jackson, Wyoming, and a cowboy moving a herd of cattle across a road was in front of us. And I screamed at Michael, stop the car, grabbed the camera, got out, snapped some photos as this cowboy went across the road and sort of down into his barn. And that was the first cowboy I'd ever seen. And I kind of didn't even know why Western art was a thing. So, it was my ideal subject because I can paint people and horses in the same painting. It's like, this is me. This is what I want to do. So I went home, painted that one cowboy, shipped it to my gallery in Jackson, and she sold it instantly and said, send more cowboys. This is great. And I said, I can't.
That's a classic gallerist, right? They sell it fast. Give me more of those.
And more of those. Well, I said, I can't. I don't. That's the only cowboy I've ever seen in my life. Don't know anything about cowboys. So she organized on our next trip for me to go out on ranches with cowboys and go on a cattle drive and get photographs of them and work with them. And so that's how I got into painting cowboys. And of course, once I was into that cowboy art, that's when I started looking at Western art, which again, I mean, I've been so naive through this whole thing. It's just sort of happened to me. I didn't know Western art was a thing. I didn't know there were Western art galleries. I'd never heard of Howard Turpning. But when I started looking into it, there was this whole world out there that, again, I'd never seen, but it was fascinating to me. So I started painting cowboys, but I also got really interested in Native Americans and the history of America and the people. Again, to me, it's the people, how they think, how they lived, all that sort of thing. So then again, how do you paint Native Americans? Where do you find them? I had no idea. I'm in Australia. So I contacted one of the tribes and said, do you have anyone that would model for me next time I'm in that area? And I set up a photo shoot with a Nez Perce girl in Idaho in February in the snow. And that poor girl, she worked so hard. We would wrap her up in a blanket inside, rush her out into the snow, take the blanket off, take a whole lot of photos until she started shivering uncontrollably. And then we'd wrap her up and take her back inside to warm up. And that was my first Native American model. And I spent a long time talking to her and learning a bit about her history, and then started buying books and reading the history and studying as much as I could, because I didn't want to paint Native Americans without doing it properly. I didn't want to just paint the surface. I need to understand the people and what they're thinking and what am I painting and why is it like that? What is their clothing about? What are their beliefs and traditions and that sort of thing. So that got me down that whole thing of studying Native American history. And I also, finding models was one thing, but then having the historical clothing to put them in was a whole other problem. And I couldn't afford to buy genuine antiques because they're too expensive and you wouldn't actually let anyone wear them. So I started making my own clothing, replica accoutrements. And because I'd been a fashion designer and I'd beaded wedding gowns, I understood beading. So I sort of came full circle again, where I got to do beadwork again. And I took up beading on leather and making clothing for my models. So that was, kind of bits of my life keep coming back together, and I keep coming round in circles. So
yeah, that's very interesting.
yeah.
And do you still make clothing like that? Do you still do that?
No, because I've kind of drifted away from that again. I kind of, in COVID, I lost that connection. I lost the connection with my models and that sort of thing. And I don't know, COVID just changed my brain completely. So I've shifted focus. I'm still painting them, but not so much.
Yeah.
I've sort of come back to wildlife now.
Did you do Aboriginal work when you were painting any of the Aboriginal in Australia?
No.
Yeah, or collecting any of that material?
No, they're a different sort of culture, and it just wasn't something I was particularly interested in. I mean, they're there, and I know all about them. And, I know about their languages and stuff. So I was conscious of that history. The history is very similar of a country that was fully occupied and then taken over by white people coming in. It's a similar story. So I was kind of familiar with that when I started studying American history. I could draw those parallels of how that worked. But I found Native Americans really interesting because they've got such a visual history to them, the clothing and their own paintings and their storytelling and all of that too. As a visual artist, that was fascinating because it's a whole other visual arts form that I could study.
You ever see yourself potentially doing Australian subject matters for galleries in Australia? I know you're an American artist and you're very successful, but talking about that full circle,
I don't think so. No, we got our citizenship here, and we've embraced America. And
I know that. Yeah, no, I get that. I could just see you also being like a guest artist in Australia that does American things, but
I don't know about that. Maybe, who knows what's in the future, but I don't think so.
So now you're going to go to Wyoming. That's your
Mhm.
next adventure. And that happens fairly soon.
Well, we don't know. We've got to sell our house and build a new house there. And
Yeah.
it's, it's probably a good time for selling a house. It's not a good time for building a house. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it could take a few years. So we don't know.
Yeah. But
There again, how hard can it be? We'll just work through it step by step. And when stuff happens, we'll deal with it.
right. Well, it's such an interesting ride that you've made.
Hmm.
What would you tell other artists that, might be in your same kind of footsteps of how to persevere? I mean, that's really what you've done. You've persevered, and
Yeah.
every time there's been a big challenge, you've kind of just pushed through and gone to that
Hmm.
next level.
Yeah. It's tenaciousness. My husband would say pig-headedness, just determination to succeed, I guess. I didn't say to you that my mother, when she was working with Bessemer and being a salesperson, she did a whole lot of positive thinking training, and she took me with her to all of that. So I grew up on that. Dennis Waitley, if people have heard of him, one of the earliest positive thinking trainers. And a lot of that, again, mind control of setting a goal, visualizing what you want, and then making it happen. So that's the way I live my life. I come up with a new idea and go, that's what I want. I'm going to work on that. And I, work on it. I visualize it. I get there. You move up to that next level. And from there, the view is different. And you look a little higher and go, oh, I'd like to be over there now. And that's just how I've done it.
Yeah, positive self-talk as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just determination and confidence with myself that I can make this work. And it's kind of a competition with myself to see how much I can do, how much this girl from small town Australia can achieve in the world. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, but
Well, one of
that's
the
me.
things you've had to deal with is people being a woman that people have said, no, you can't do that. You have to have kids and do that. And I'm sure you have felt the same thing as an artist in America and anywhere else too, especially being an artist that does Western art. Have you found that to be a challenge, or dealing with, oh, she's a great painter for a girl kind of stuff?
I don't think I have, but then I've been in a lot of these top shows, in the museum shows, and I've kind of reached that upper level, but there's not many of us up there.
Yeah.
And it has always annoyed me that these big Western shows might have 50 or 100 artists, but at most they've got 8 women in there.
Yeah.
And, I'm really grateful that I've been one of those 8 women, but could they not find a few more? Another 5 or 10 of us? There's plenty of us out there, but
There are.
those opportunities are not being given to women. So I didn't suffer, but all the other women artists who are not getting those opportunities have suffered.
What do you think we can do as a community, especially the Western art community, to change that?
Give people opportunities. I think a lot of what has happened to me is because I've been given opportunities that were a little bit outside of where I was, and I've had to push myself to achieve it. So when I got into the Portraiture, Masters of the American West, that was a huge thing. And when I looked at the catalogue and looked at the people I was up against, it was like, what am I doing in this show? Why have they picked me? Just little old me from Australia. I was still in Australia when I got in that show, and I had no idea where that came from. Obviously, they'd seen me in galleries or something. And but it pushed me. It's like, okay, if I'm going to be worthy of this show, I've got to turn out some paintings that are up there with those big names that are in that show. And it really pushed me to be better and to paint bigger and paint something that could stand up. But if I hadn't had that opportunity, I would have stayed painting little women-sized paintings for galleries because that's what was expected of us. So I think I've grown because I've been given the opportunities, and a lot of women artists don't grow because they don't get the opportunity to show what they can do. If you're stuck in a small gallery and the price limit is low or the size limit is low, then you're kind of kept in that little box and you don't get to burst out and show what you can do.
Yeah. I think that's a good point for all of us in the art world to remember, and including gallerists, because because we're all we do this, whether we do it consciously or subconsciously. I think we do this, and we need to actually recognize that we're doing this and to give people chances. Not only women, but indigenous as well, people of color. I think
absolutely,
also have had that same road, which makes it more difficult, I think. So, and clearly, you have jumped a lot of hoops to get where you are. I mean, a lot.
Oh yeah. And I've worked nonstop since I was 18. I've been self-employed, self-reliant, working like crazy 7 days a week.
Yeah,
so,
I can tell a lot of this comes from your mother, that she was quite the role model for you.
Oh yeah, she was.
Yeah. That's amazing. Do you know of any other Australian artists that have made the jump over?
There've been a handful, but most of them haven't stayed. Some of them came for a while and went back. Some of them did like I did. They would just come and do shows, but not ever move here. There's one sculptor, and I know you're going to say, who is he? And my brain has gone blank. But there is an Australian sculptor who's doing well. He's in some of the shows I'm in. But no, I don't know of very many, if any others.
Does it go the other way at all, where Americans go over to Australia to?
No. Well, see, the whole point of coming here was that there isn't a big enough art market in Australia to make a living. And so even my artist friends who are still in Australia 20 years later are still struggling and having to teach or have other jobs on the side and not really making a living. There's just not enough concentration of people in one place who all want to buy the same thing for it to build the sort of markets that we have here.
And in places like Sydney, do they must have some big, strong art galleries, but don't they? They do. They must, right?
Yeah, they do. But, in cities, it's always more modern art.
That was my question. Is it mainly
so
art?
The wildlife and the realism is kind of more regional again. So, you paint your local area, and your only options to show that is small regional galleries to small regional markets who don't have the big money.
Right.
So it's just a different market.
And your dreams were up
Australia, here. I always dream big.
That's good. Well,
I'm ambitious. I don't know.
I think that's a big takeaway, right? Is, don't limit what you think you can do. Shoot for the stars, shoot for the very best galleries if you can. Don't, if you get shut down, if they say, well, no, don't take it like, oh, I'm not good enough. You just have to keep banging away, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, I've always tried to approach it from both sides. So there's the artistic side that's it's emotional, and this is what I love to do and all that sort of thing. But I've also got this business brain who can step back from that and analyze it and say, well, okay, so if they've rejected me, why? Why wasn't I good enough? What did I not bring to them that satisfied what they were looking for? And just be very analytical about it.
Yeah, and that's true. And a lot of times I think artists, just like actors, they may take it too personal, because sometimes it really isn't that they're not good enough. It might be, in my case, sometimes it's like I have artists that are in that, lane, and I don't want to take anything away from their lane.
Yeah.
Because they've committed to me, especially if there's somebody that I've had for a very long time. It's like, they were with me when I wasn't anybody at all and couldn't sell art, and they're still with me. So why would I want to have an artist that, does similar subject matter and might take away from their
Yes. Yeah. And I mentor people. I mentor women artists, and I say to them, you've got to go where there isn't anyone doing what you're doing. Don't look for the gallery that's already full of exactly what you're doing, because there's no space for you there. You've got to find a gallery where you fit in as something different, or work on what you're doing so that you're presenting something different that people want.
Right. Yeah.
I go back to my fashion training of, I have to come up with something new that's going to be what people want next season. And I always had to be ahead of the trends. And that's kind of the same in art. If you're trying to find your niche, there's no point painting the same as everybody else. You've got to have your own story and your own style and your own way of doing things to stand out.
And I think it keeps you fresh as a creative person to be able to, continually to push the boundary and go, let me try this. This might be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you went from doing wildlife to seeing a cowboy cross the road and going, let me do that.
I can do that. Yeah.
And that
but I
opens
already
another-
had those skills. I knew how to
Yeah.
paint people. I had painted a lot of horses, so
Yeah,
I
that's
could put
right.
those things together.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've never wanted to be pigeonholed. I've never wanted to be the artist that has painted the same painting over and over for their whole career. I've got too many ideas for that. My brain is full of paintings that will never be painted.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be pigeonholed. So I've always been diverse so that I could swing a little bit as markets change and, fashions change and ideas change. And when I get bored with something and go, I've had enough of that, I'm going to do this for a while.
Yeah. So how can people find you? Why don't you give us your website, Instagram, and any shows that you have coming up as well?
Yeah, KrystieMelaine.com, but you have to spell it correctly. So it's KrystieMelaine. And I'm the only one in the world with that name as far as I can see. So if you get the spelling right, you'll find me. So
and Trailside has online show for you coming up.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in May by the time we get the catalog done, but they're going to do a printed catalog for me. And
nice.
I kind of didn't realize until I was halfway through painting the paintings that this is my 30th year of being a full-time artist. So this has turned into my big 30th anniversary exhibition. So I'm kind of excited about that. And it just kind of happened that it was going to be birds. So yeah, I've gone full circle again. So 30 years down the track, I've come back to painting birds, but big scale, and loving it.
Yeah, I think big scale is much. I always tell my artists, give me the biggest you can do. I just love.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because I know how hard it is to do a big painting, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and you only have so many big paintings in you. And so I want the greatest works that you can do. I mean, to me, that's like the joy of handling art is, I know that you may not ever be able to do something like that again, or very few. And I got the opportunity to handle it.
Well, that's good. That's a good attitude, because up until just last year, I guess, the galleries all said, no, send, small and medium, low price, keep it affordable.
Yeah.
But finally, I had a gallery who said, no, actually, let's just go big, go as big as you can. Let's see what we can do with this. And I've always wanted to paint big, but I've always felt constrained by, you've got to have a variety of sizes and you've got to have affordable things. And I guess I'm at a point in my career when I can go, just the heck with it. I'm going to paint big stuff. I'm going to paint what I like, and I'll find the people that want them.
Yeah.
And it's working. I'm finding the people that want them.
Yeah, that's right. The big paintings are great. Yeah, no. Just keep doing them. You'll sell them for sure.
I hope so.
Any
they take up a lot of storage space.
Any final words that you have for the audience?
I don't know. I just love painting. It's my life, obviously. I'm passionate about it. I hope I paint till the day I die. And
you will.
Yeah. I hope people enjoy what I paint.
Yeah, and they can find you at different museum shows you do as well. And I'm sure if they go to your website, they can find whatever museum show is coming up that you're going to be in. And that's where I got to see you at the Briscoe.
At the Briscoe for the Night of Artists.
I've known you for a very long time, actually.
Yes.
So I was happy to see you there, because I knew you had a very interesting story. I could just feel it, and you did.
Kind of unique.
Well, that's what makes you who you are, right? That's I'll look at your paintings a little differently when I see them. Just you can't help it when you hear this backstory, right? It's just a very interesting, circuitous route that you have taken. I'm a Western artist, right?
Yeah, exactly. In America, who knew? A little girl from small town Australia. But it's it's a whole thing. It's my story makes me who I am. But the fun of buying art is knowing the artist behind it. So you're not just buying some picture, you're buying a part of their life. And
that's right.
I collect art as well from my friends. And when I look at the painting, I think about the friend and their life and what led them to paint that. And it becomes a whole story behind the painting.
And we didn't really talk about it, but you alluded to it at one point that you loved birds since you were a little kid. You were a bird watcher, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So something about that has stuck, just like, your painting started when you were a little kid, that you love birds, and I'm sure it shows in your paintings.
Well, because I was so shy, I would just sit at the window and look at the birds, and the birds are interesting in Australia anyway. But when I was quite young, a brand of tea that my parents drank brought out a collectible cards of birds of the world. So I started collecting those and seeing these little cards every week or so. I'd get a new card of a new bird and I'd read the screed on the back. And my parents bought me bird books, so I'd look up the species and I'd learn about it. And so that was my thing. I've always kept bird lists. I'm a twitcher. I like to write down the birds I've seen and keep a list of them, that sort of thing. For a while in Australia, I did bird banding of migratory waders, these little tiny birds that would fly all the way up to the Arctic to breed in the summer, and then they'd fly all the way back to the south coast of Australia and hang out on our beaches for the summer. And I would go down there and we would catch them in nets and then have to weigh and put little bands on their tiny little legs and things. And to actually hold those birds in my hand, that was amazing. So
Yeah.
just all of those things as part of me and part of how I love birds, and I love flight, and I dream that I can fly. So, that whole flying thing and not being tethered to the earth and being able to go where you like, that sort of thing. There's so many aspects of painting, and when I'm painting, I have a lot of time to think. Obviously, when you're sitting in front of an easel, your brain goes off on these other journeys. So it's a whole imaginary world I live in. I don't know.
It would be an interesting show for you is do the endangered birds of America.
Yeah.
We really
that would be
would,
interesting.
whooping cranes and just there's probably 30 birds that are endangered in America, I would think.
Yeah.
The California condor and those kind of things.
Yeah.
It would just be a very interesting,
That would be interesting. Yeah.
even an interesting show for you in a museum, just to have them all of those kind of things.
Thank you. That's a good idea. I like that.
If you do it, let me know. I want to know where it's hanging.
Okay.
All right, Krystii. Well, I'll let you go, but I appreciate
Okay.
you taking the time, and I look forward to watching your career and maybe getting to see the endangered birds of the Americans. That would be awesome.
Maybe. We never know.
Yeah, just go through your little cards and see, pull all the ones. Yeah, a few of them are
I'm
probably
sure I've got them somewhere.
I bet you do. It would be very interesting.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
In 100 years from now, we might go, wow, those birds were still alive when she painted it.
Yeah. Oh, that would be sad.
Like Audubon, but true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but true.
You never know. Interesting.
All right.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Yes, tell your husband hi for me, and thank you
I will.
coming on. All right.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.